Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on The Father Show. And I'm your host, Mike Thompson. Today, we're going to have a great time. We're going to be talking about going through our hard times and still staying together and not being divided, because right now, with this COVID and, people not working, they're out of work, whether they want to be or whether it's just something they can't find a job. This is a hard time for everyone, and everybody is trying to figure out how to stay together, keep their family together, keep their relationship together, at the same time trying to survive and making sure we all have enough food to eat and do the things that we like to do. But before we get started, if you have not subscribed to the show, please go to our YouTube channel and hit that subscription button. And while you're there, hit the notification bell so that way you'll be notified whenever we have a show. And if you are a man that's looking for resources like the guest we have today, please go to the Father Show with MikeThompson.com. Click on resources, and there you will find resources like attorneys, counselors, therapists, and other people that are there that can provide you with service. So, without further ado, I want to go ahead and bring in our guest, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about him first. Ed, and you might have remember he'd been on the show before, but we have in the back Ed Coambs, and he is an international recognized thought leader in financial therapy, and who has been cited by the Wall Street Journal, the Associated Press, Time, and CNBC. Now, he leads couples through therapy from financial despair, which is what we're going to be talking about today, and frustration, into financial intimacy and connection using the latest in love and brain science. Now, he has earned a master's degree in business, one in counseling, and also in financial planning, and is a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified financial planner, and certified therapist. And he also, if that's not enough, he also has a new book out called The Healthy Love and Money Way. And we'll be talking about that a little bit today. So I want you to be ready, and hopefully you're going to learn something. And this is really going to be helpful to you, because I know a lot of men and a lot of families have been going through some hard times with this COVID pandemic. And so, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, without me talking anymore, hey, let's have Ed Combs. Welcome him back to the show. Ed, what's going on, man?
Mike, I'm so glad to be back with you. Being able to talk about men and money, like that's a hornet's nest of a topic, isn't it? But you're a guy, I'm a guy, and we're talking about to guys, but we're also talking to the wives that are partnered with them, the other family
Right.
members, and we're talking about going into hard times, which requires a lot of vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, but most of the guys I know, they're not like number one, like thing. I want to get vulnerable. Like that's not the thing they wake
Yeah.
up in the morning and say. Like,
Right.
I'm ready to get vulnerable today. I'm ready to really deal with my stuff.
If they do, they're gonna make sure nobody else is around. It's not, this is not a topic that you're gonna sit around with your buddies and say, hey, let's watch this and see how vulnerable we can be. If you do, you've got a very, very good friend that you are very comfortable with and you really trust that you're going to be able to do that with.
I think that's such a great point, right? As men, it's hard to get vulnerable, and it takes a lot to have even just one friend where you can
Yeah.
be real about what's going on. And then we add the complication is maybe it's hard to get real with your wife about what's going on and what you're feeling.
Yeah.
And we're
Very.
talking about how do we bust through that vulnerability and work with it and find a way, because Mike, the thing that I've come to appreciate, and I hope the guys especially listening are, I was a firefighter. Before I got on all this junk, I was a firefighter, and you know that word vulnerability. I even stuttered just now saying it, thinking of firefighter. We didn't do vulnerability. That was not our thing. Our thing was like knock the door down, put the fire out, get on with it. But the vulnerability piece came for me later as I ultimately became a therapist, and some of my own life issues started breaking through and becoming problematic, where my wife and I weren't getting on the same page. And I really had to come to grips with the reality that part of the problem was me and an absence of vulnerability.
But let me ask you something as a therapist. Vulnerability for a man is hard. But is that because the perception that his wife might have or his friends have is why he feels like he cannot be vulnerable?
I think it's both of those things, right? In his present life, it's both. I don't want to show my wife weakness or unavailability, or that maybe I don't have things together. And the same is true with his buddies, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a great, your listeners might be interested when we put this in the show notes, but there's The Mask We Live In.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great, like, 1 hour documentary. It's all about men and the absence of vulnerability and what happens for us when we don't get to have a place where we can really be vulnerable. But for most men, we grow up in an environment where we learn, crying is for sissies. Put on
Yeah.
your big boy. Toughen up. You cry like a girl. Right? So we hear all these messages about basically not being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And vulnerability is a learned experience, right? That ability to enter into deeply with someone and let them see when you feel scared, when you feel shameful,
Mm-hmm.
when you feel angry. Even, I know a lot of men, they really struggle with anger because it's explosive. And when
Yeah.
anger gets explosive, that's when it gets scary for your partner.
But don't you think that you, as a man, you need to know where your wife stands on a man being vulnerable? Because, we hear a lot of women say, well, I wish he would just open up more. I wish he would just tell me how he feel. Oh, he's just so enclosed. But I think the man normally feels that if I show my vulnerability to my wife, she's going to think I am less than a man.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of questions and experiences. And this is the neat thing about being a couples therapist is a lot of women don't know how to handle their husband or their man's vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
So even if they're asking for it, right, and they're saying, I want it, once the man opens up and starts to become vulnerable, they don't know how to handle it or what to do with
Mm-hmm.
it. Because the other side of it is that women have also internalized rules and ideas about male vulnerability.
Right. Right.
And so they can say that they want it and they want to feel more connected. They want to be looked at in the eyes. They want to hear the feeling words. I'm scared about fill in the blank. That's, we're talking about money. I'm scared about not having enough money to pay the bills. I'm scared that you're going to reject me because I'm not able to get a job right now or laid off. But the wife's got to be able to show up and stand on her own 2 feet and provide some empathy there also, not
Mm-hmm.
judgment or criticism or contempt. And those things can come through in some pretty subtle ways.
Mm-hmm.
So many men in my practice, when I have them turn and look at their wife, and I'm looking at the wife, and I'm not married to her, so I can look at it and see the real emotion in her face. And I'll say, hey, what's going on her face over there? And he'll give me one of two answers. I don't know. Or she's angry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at her clear as day, and she's either engaged or she's scared. Sometimes she's angry, but not as often as they think she is. But that's part of this vulnerability is also, as men, we got to learn and practice using emotion words, which it sounds so simple and fundamental, but it's, can you accurately identify sadness? Can you accurately identify fear? Can you accurately identify anxiety? Can you accurately identify shame? Can you accurately identify anger? But these are core emotions that if we misread, we respond inappropriately
So
because
is
each
no,
go
go
ahead
ahead. Go ahead.
each emotional state warrants a slightly different response or way of showing up.
Now, would you say that if a man can't recognize that in his spouse, is that because of a lack of knowing how to identify those particular points, the emotions when they come up, or he just don't understand?
Yeah, I think it's at one level it's he doesn't understand or doesn't know how, but I think at a deeper level there's an absence of experience. We learn about emotions through relationship and communication,
Hmm.
and someone actually being able to accurately name the emotional state that they're in, right? And being
Okay.
able to pair that with the language that they're saying. And so
Hmm.
sometimes guys are also getting hit with a barrage of words from their wife, and all they, I don't know what to do with all of this, right? I mean, so working with emotions is more complicated than it seems on the surface, and it takes a lot of practice and skill, and that's why getting into therapy and couples therapy can be so powerful. Is the therapist is going to work as kind of an emotional regulator, if you will,
Okay.
and help you be able to both you and your partner name the emotions that you're having, communicate them in a more effective way so that your partner can then respond in a way that helps you feel seen or mirrored, right? This is empathy.
Hmm.
And when we get accurate empathy, then we start to experience emotional regulation.
Okay.
So instead of telling someone stop being so sad, right, is which is one way to try to regulate someone's sadness, or stop being so angry. You
Hmm.
ever told someone to stop being so angry?
No, I don't think so.
You're a
I'm,
smart guy.
oh, yeah,
Don't
because
do
I'm
that.
not that type to sit up there and say stop being there saying. I will sit down and try to figure out why you're angry. Let's discuss why you're angry, and
Right,
if you give me the opportunity to do so.
right. That's right, and that's what we really when we're with people and we can recognize that they're in these emotional states, becoming curious like you're talking about and asking some good open-ended questions from kind of a place of compassion and curiosity will usually help the person start to settle again.
Okay. Because, we were talking about the struggle with finances and that conversation you're having with your wife or your spouse. And all those emotions come to play when you're dealing with the finances. How can you recognize, as a man, recognize what your wife is feeling, maybe even before she says it?
Oh, that's a really good question, and I think there's some activities or exercises that you can do. One of the things that comes first to mind is, and this if this is unfamiliar to you, let's just say that's okay. This is a new exercise. Like pretend that you're at the gym and you're getting a new bicep curl or a different bicep curl, and it's just awkward, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you can do is you go off by yourself and get out a sheet of paper and just reflect and remember, when's the last time my wife was upset about something related to money? Right now, you have a little distance because you're not trying to actually do it with her live in motion. It's a little bit pulled back,
Mm-hmm.
but you can start to connect through and start to become curious. Why was she? What was she doing? What was she saying? What maybe happened before that? What were the different feelings? And for some guys, what they may even need to do is you can go to Google. It's so easy. Pull up an emotional word list.
Okay.
Pull up the emotional word list, and then look at it and start figuring out which emotion fits these different reactions.
Okay. But how many men is going to do that?
Well, that's a good question. Not as many as I'd like to think.
Yeah.
But here's the thing is I think partly men don't do it because they don't know what to do. They've never had someone show them and teach them how to do that. A lot
Okay.
of men have missed the opportunity to truly learn how to become self-reflective.
Mm-hmm.
And self-reflection, psychologically speaking, is a very important core skill. It moves us from a mental process of reactivity and automatic thinking into a more of a psychological process of awareness and understanding and flexibility, being able to learn to see things from different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
If we haven't developed that, then every time that we enter into communication with our partner, we're just going to be off to the races, reacting, responding, talking without thinking. And that's where that spiral downwards in the relationship goes. So that's part of why therapy for so many clients is so effective, is because it creates a container for them to reflect and to slow down. Our brains, especially when we're feeling threatened, are wired to work faster, not slower.
Okay.
But we actually need our brains to be able to slow down when we feel threatened so that we can actually come into a more collaborative solution to the conflict.
Okay. Because I would think that, when you have that, when you get into the conflict, like myself, when I get into a conflict, if my wife and I are going to argue, uh, I'm going to shut down because
Mm.
I don't want to say something that I'm going to regret later. So before I open my mouth, I'm going to process it and think about it. And then I come back and say, okay, here's where we are. I heard what you said, or I think I heard what you said.
Mm.
And, let's try to sit down and discuss it. But I know there's a lot of men that I've talked to that can't get their wife to do that, to sit down and discuss things in a calm manner. Because I don't know, she's already gotten herself so frustrated and so pissed off before she said anything that now she just got to get it out. I got to say it. I got to say it. I want to say it. And this is how I feel. And I know people in general, when they have something in their mind, they can care less about what you say because they've already fixed it in their head as to what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, what you need, what's going to be done.
Right. And that is a perfect example of the being in that mindset of non-reflectivity,
Okay.
but reactivity. It's already foreclosed. And so you as the partner, what you've got to be able to do, and a lot of people think that they're hearing their partner.
Mm-hmm.
They're really not. They're hearing noise,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not really hearing the underlying, oftentimes, fear and anxiety, uh, especially the fear of being rejected or being misunderstood, is so deep for people, and especially when it comes up around money. And so, what we have to build as a partner is that ability to really be able to mirror back to our partner what they're saying to us in a non-judgmental, non-mocking way, right? So it might be something like, "Wow, Mike, you're really feeling um, concerned about not having a job, and you've been working really hard at trying to get a job, but you just can't get any callbacks. I imagine you're feeling pretty scared right now."
Well, do you think it'll be productive for the man to go to the wife before and say, you know what, look, baby, I'm trying, but I'm not able to find anything. I'm looking, but I can't find anything. Uh, but I just want to maybe keep you aware and keep you up to date on what's going on. What do you think that'll help?
Oh, I think that's a big thing, right? Is that, and that's an act of vulnerability.
Yeah.
You're being proactive, but you're also being vulnerable about what's happening or not happening, even though that's the expectation. And in that, in the way that you talked about, you can also add to it and say, I imagine this, you're getting more concerned the longer it goes before I get back into work.
Mm-hmm.
And I want I can't fully control what's going to happen, but here's the things that I'm doing. What else would you like me to know? Is there anything else that I can do to be with you through this?
Mm-hmm.
Even using the joining language of saying we're in this together.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times at that place, partners are feeling very isolated and like they're not in it together. And we want, as much as possible, for couples just to realize we're in this together. This is an us problem, not a you problem.
Yeah.
You may be the one looking for the job because I'm going to stay home and take care of the kids or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm already have a job, but I need you to get a second job or a job to keep us going.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really a we. And a lot of times couples can get stuck in the I.
Yeah. And you're a couple. You are a we.
You are a we. Yes.
Now, it would be, is it something that a man can look out for, or, I don't know. What about sitting down on a weekly basis or a monthly basis and having a budget talk or money talk, and so you can discuss the finances and see where you guys are headed?
Yeah, I think that can be a really healthy and productive thing. And there's some of this gets really challenging depending on where you're at in your life, right?
Yeah.
I'm married 15 years and I've got 3 young boys. I can be honest with you. My wife and I don't sit down and look at our budget once a week.
Mm-hmm.
We hardly have enough time to talk to each other as it is.
Mm.
We're also pretty much in sync right now, so we're in good shape, right? But if you are out of sync with your partner, you may need to go through a period of time where you do have very regular meetings.
Yeah.
Part of what that's going to do is, instead of trying to tackle everything at once, you're going to break things down into smaller bite-sized pieces.
Okay.
Right? Instead of trying to put together the whole household budget at one time, let's look at where are all our sources of income. What do we have? Do we know where the bills are and how they're coming through?
Mm-hmm.
Let's
Now,
get that
even if you're having no money issues, shouldn't you still be on one page and know what the other person is goals may be, and so you both can be on the same page, or at least know where each of them want to go?
Absolutely. That's a really big marker of financial well-being for couples, is when they're able to inquire and know and understand what their partner's goals are.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes what's hard in life is if we don't know what our own goals are and what we're wanting to accomplish, it's very hard to communicate that to our partner.
Yeah.
And so I want to normalize that it can be very hard to have our own clear goals. So that raises a whole nother process, probably, right, that you need to engage in. And what I do know is, depending on a number of factors, but one of them being the family that you grew up in, and to some extent also the culture or place in culture that you've grown up, even the idea of setting goals can be very foreign or threatening, or doesn't make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm talking about is there's quite a number of people that have had pretty significant family ruptures or breakups where there's been pretty profound financial consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can leave you with this sense of, why bother planning? It could all end anyways. And if that's part of your reality, then we've got to work through that a little bit first before goal setting is going to become something that makes more sense or is more natural.
So you're saying that they would have to really make sure they buying into the relationship, because they might have a question, well, I don't want to tell her everything or share everything because she's going to leave, or hell, I might leave.
Yes, big time. And those experiences where you may be having those thoughts are also based in what you've seen in your own life. You and I both know plenty of us have grown up in families where either the father or the mother have walked out at some point or been
Mm-hmm.
in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And for a developing child, that creates a degree of insecurity, both relationally and financially, typically. there's kind of two ways that people end up responding to that type of experience. One is to become hyper focused on goal setting and trying to control as many outcomes as possible.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of that is hands off. I'm not going to deal with it. I'm going to avoid it because I can't control it anyway. So why bother? Sometimes people are conscious that there's that connection. Many times people are not fully conscious of that connection.
And that would be something that I would, think we would have to talk through and, really discuss because, and we talked about this on the previous show, knowing what your spouse money issues are before you even get married. Like my wife and I knew she likes savings. She likes to save money. I like to save money. So we, that was perfect. I don't have to worry about saying, "Hey, I'm putting this over here so we can have for later." And she like, "Yeah, she's worse than me." She was like, "Okay, dude, what we at? Where we at? Where we at? How much we got?" So but I find it really great for us, and I think for other couples it would work as well when you can sit down and you have that synergy where you know where you both are going, you know what your goals are, you know that, I know my wife wants to do certain things around the house. And, and I might say, well, not right now because I want to save for this or I want to make sure I build it up for something else. But when I do have it, I can say, okay, go ahead, do what you got to do. And it's great when I see couples that can work together. And you mentioned it earlier. This is a we, and I say, you got great ideas. We're talking about some great ideas, but a marriage is between two people, and nobody else should be messing with that unless they come to see you and they're asking for your advice.
Right.
But when you have outside influence that the other partner doesn't know about, and say, girl, he needs to do this, and girl, you need to get rid of him because he's not bringing in any money. Oh, girl, that's putting negativity, and then you're going to bring it right home, and you're going to look at him differently, even though he may be trying to do the best that he can do. And maybe that's working at a fast food restaurant. Who cares? But he's bringing in something. Is there a way that you can, men can be able to be that vulnerable, be that strong to say, I'm doing what I can, where I can, and, this is between you and I, not your friends, not your mom, not your dad, not your best friend, not your co-workers or anybody else. This is between you and I. And let us discuss it and be on one accord.
Yeah, I think the big thing for men to hear in this, and women here that are hearing this in support of men, is it's going to be a journey to get to that place.
Yeah.
We know psychologically that we're actually wired to receive support not just from our spouse, but from multiple people,
Mm-hmm.
right? But what you're talking about is that protected bubble, or what we like to call is the couple bubble, where it's like ultimately this is between the two of us,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to come to some shared understanding, and that it's not a one-time conversation or act. It's an ongoing exploration of curiosity, the potential for growth, the potential for change.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, I think for a lot of people, they even have this question, well, can people even change?
Yeah.
And I'm here to tell you, yes, people can change. And it's a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, because you got to
You
want
don't,
to. You got to be open to it and to even change because, nobody can make you change, but you got to be, open to it. And once again, show your little vulnerability.
well, and I do want to say that motivation for change comes from having the right environment for change.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can put a seed in the ground that is wired to want to change, but if the ground and the nutrients are not right, the seed is not going to grow.
Okay.
It's going to collapse, right? In a more complicated way, there's this whole field called developmental psychology. And what it does is it really studies how our social environment shapes our ability or intrinsic ability to grow and change and mature and flourish and move towards increasing complexity of understanding ourselves and our world.
Okay.
But there's some environmental factors, relational factors that need to be present in order for that potential and motivation to change to happen. That's why we have this whole field of therapy, is because we've studied very extensively the science around what environment has to be created for people to change. And it's one of the big words we use is called unconditional positive regard.
Okay.
It's a fancy word for saying not being judgmental.
Okay.
It's a safe place, right? You can be who you are right now here today. And I'm going to trust that in accepting that, and many other things happening, of course, but from that foundational outlook, you're going to be able to open up and grow and explore. But if it feels like you're going to be rejected or criticized or judged,
Mm-hmm.
psychologically, you're naturally going to stay closed off.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, that's something where we really do want to also be very conscious that many people in our society have grown up in an environment that's very emotionally threatening to them. For people that are here that really want to dive into this a little bit more, it's called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And if you research that, you start to really understand that our childhood matters profoundly for our mental and relational health. And that sometimes it is not as easy as it may sound in this type of conversation to affect the type of change that you want. But it can happen. But just like if you end up with a cancer diagnosis, you'd find the best cancer doctor around.
Mm-hmm.
If you're really struggling in your relationship to get connected, and this type of conversation and listening to this is not moving the needle, working with a qualified professional to get the right treatment and environment to give you the potential for change. Right? We all know not everyone with cancer makes it, unfortunately.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, not everybody that comes for mental health services makes it.
Right.
But
Yeah.
you're giving yourself the best chance at it.
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, you want to be able to say that if your marriage ends for whatever reason, you want to say that I gave it my best. So you can walk away and say, you know what? I gave it my all. I put everything in it and it just didn't work.
That's right. And I think that there's the reality is for many people after that marriage ends, they're still going to, in time, want to repartner with somebody.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you can get those gains in therapy and that self-reflection growing and that understanding of why am I the way that I am? What do I do when we get in conflict? I appreciate you talking about if it's in conflict, I'm likely to shut down and withdraw a little bit so that I can kind of start to feel safe again and start to think. And then I can reflect and then I can come back and say, okay, here's what I think was happening. Is this right? And you can re-engage in a productive conversation. Right? You've developed that capacity over time, or maybe you've had it your whole life. I don't know, but that's so important because that's the type of stuff that you start learning about. Instead of maybe, Mike, in the past, you would just disappear and your wife would think, well, what's wrong with him? Why is he disappearing? And I'm feeling so abandoned. But now, maybe, I'm making this up, right? I don't know for sure.
Oh, you're almost close.
But now you might be able to signal and say, honey, I gotta back out for a little bit, get my head reset so that I can come in and have a good conversation with you.
Yeah.
So now she doesn't feel abandoned when you withdraw.
Yeah.
Right? She knows he's going to come back to me and have this conversation. The problem is when you just withdraw without signaling, and you don't come back, that leaves them stuck.
Mm-hmm. I will say that I know for me, I have learned a lot through doing these shows and listening to people like yourself. I've learned a lot about things that not to do. And because I've always been one that I will shut down. You know, if you tick me off, I'm going to shut down, and I might not talk to you for a day or two. Um, because, like I said earlier, I don't want to say something that I might regret. So
Right.
I will just wait, and really I process it. I go through my head what was said, how it was said, and how did I feel about it, and what I want to say about it, and then try to come back and discuss it. Now, I'm thankful I got a wife that will let me do that to some degree.
Right.
But I know a lot of women, they want it now, and they want you to answer them now. And they'll back a man into a corner, which I think is the wrong thing to do if he's not the type to discuss it that way.
It's a very dangerous move on women's part, and it's I'm not blaming women because when you're in that place, you're in a lot of distress,
Mm-hmm.
right? The reality is what the distress is equal for both partners, but looks very different,
Mm-hmm.
and that oftentimes for many women and men when they're in that place, that their fear of abandonment is as high as it gets, and that's why they're going after and trying to engage, because psychologically we are wired to be bonded with our partner, and when we feel our partner not with us,
Mm-hmm.
it arouses incredible amounts of threat in our mind and brain. So oftentimes what happens is as we're growing up in our childhood, we learn these patterns of relational connection and disconnection. And what happens when relational disconnection does occur? Do we repair and come back together and have shared understanding, or does it never get repaired, never get to shared understanding? If
Mm-hmm.
that's the case, usually it ends means long term the relationship ends or breaks down.
Yeah.
So that's really when you got a wife that's in that attacking yip dog state. It, there's a lot of that old fear that I'm not going to be met, taken care of, or understood. The other
Mm-hmm.
side of it is it takes a lot for the guy to be able to stay present and not back away, but be able to skillfully calm and help her re-enter into regulation through being seen.
Hmm.
So this stuff is more complicated than it seems on the surface, and it does take a lot of skill, and it really does take a certain amount of psychological growth, and if people can really imagine uh, brain structure growth, right? What we know is there's loads of brain cells, billions of them in our brain that form little pathways.
Mm-hmm.
And what we have to do in these exercises we do in therapy is we're literally helping create new neural pathways in the brain that will help your brain to regulate and help you navigate through these everyday situations, like your wife's pissed off because you aren't paying the bills again,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
right?
you may be late.
So might be late or you're chronically late. And the reality is that there's neurostructure that's underdeveloped in a lot of cases that prevent you from being able to do that.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, Ed, that's going to have to be our time for today.
Yeah.
I know we could keep going for another hour.
Uh, and yeah,
Yeah. But do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to tell the audience?
yeah, I'd love to tell the audience, you're not alone in your financial distress. You're not alone if you're feeling overwhelmed, navigating a scary, threatening, challenging, confusing financial dilemma. Because whether it's because of the large economy has changed, something in the health of our society has changed, or it's just more personal. You're not alone. There's help out there. I'd love to have you come visit me at healthyloveandmoney.com. I have blog posts. You can find a link to my book. I have courses coming up. Take the chance to be a lifetime learner, to continue to explore. Let this podcast be a positive influence for you. Continue to ask questions. You can make it through this.
Yeah, and then that's a good remark because we all need to keep learning, and don't get so rigid that you just, this is who I am and this is who I'm not going to change for anybody. You know, that's our great grandfather's way of doing things. Let's progress and let's look at modern times and say, you know what? I can do better and I want to do better. And, for my wife and my kids and, for myself, number one, I want to be a better me and I want to
Yeah.
be the best version of me. And can I learn something? Yeah. Do I put it into practice right away? It might take me baby steps, but
That's right.
I'm going to do it. If it's going to make me a better person and to be able to deal with things in a better way, then I'm willing to do it. And I hope we can find a lot of men out there that will.
Well, and I think it takes two men having these types of conversations to help other men have the courage to take
Yeah.
the steps. So I appreciate the opportunity to be on the show and have the conversation.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ed, and I thank you. That's why I love having men on the show and going through the things you have and your knowledge that you have with uh, uh, marriage counseling and financial planning and all the things that you do. You are a great source of information, and I really hope a lot of men and women or families reach out to you so that they can get you know some clarity in their relationship and how to handle money in their marriage.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is our show for today, and I want to thank Ed for being on the show. But I got one thing I want to say, and it's not against Ed, but really, when we're talking financial, when you're talking a married couple, you are a team and you need to be together as a team, going one direction, knowing what direction you want to go and sticking to it, not letting outside influence. And I'm not talking about somebody like Ed. That's the kind of help and influence that you want to have. But I'm talking about the ones that will come to you and say, you shouldn't take this and you shouldn't do this. And if it's not in the best interest of you and your family, you got to get rid of it. Okay? So look for what's in the best interest of you. Now, before we go, if you have not subscribed to the show, please do. Hit that subscribe button, and while you're there, also hit that notification bell so that way anytime we upload a new show, you'll be notified. And if you are looking for resources, go to the Father Show with Mike Thompson.com, click on the resource button, and there you will find people like Ed, you'll find therapists, you'll find counselors, you'll find financial planners, you'll find attorneys in case you need one. But there you can find resources that are going to help you and get you through whatever situation that you may be. And if you can't find what you're looking for, please contact us at thefathershow@gmail.com, and there you can leave a message and let us know what you're looking for, and we'll do our best to find it and get you the information that you're asking for. So until next week when we see you again, I want to thank you. I want to just praise you and have a great time, and really don't be afraid to grow. Don't be afraid to change. And as Ed says, don't be too afraid to show the vulnerability or find someone that you can be vulnerable with. And that way that you can talk through some different issues that you may have. So until next week, I want to thank you for joining us. God bless you. And I can't wait to see you next week.